Right, good morning, friends, brothers and sisters. Can I start by greeting you on behalf of the International Federation of Journalists, its executive committee, and its 160 union worldwide. I'm very grateful to have been invited and honored to speak at this event. And here we are together again, 3 years after the onset of the seismic shift that shook this region. When we first met, the dam has just burst, and we were struggling to make sense of what was happening in the region, what only months before it would have been unthinkable that any of us would have predicted that powerful dictators like Ben Ali and Mubarak would see their iron fist grip on their countries crumble in weeks, no matter the size and strength of their security and military apparatus, and no matter their control over mass media and the brainwashing of their people. And it's still too early to make predictions. Wasn't it Chinese leader Zhou Enlai, when asked what he thought of the historic impact of the French Revolution, he replied that it was still too early to tell. But there is still one thing that we can agree on. It was not just rotten regimes that fell. Stereotypes about Arab society that were prevalent for decades in the West and among the Arab elites also fell. Most importantly, the prevalent thinking that in this region of over 300 million souls, that it offered no fertile ground for democracy. And when the IFJ's Arab unions met in 2011 to discuss the formidable challenge facing Arab journalists and the painful path to build and engage in a system of change, the Arab Spring, as it became widely labeled, was indeed an event of Berlin Wall magnitude. Issues of freedom, of dignity, of democracy, of human rights that underpin this revolution are crucial, not just for citizens, but also for the evolution of Arab journalism. And this was the prodigious backdrop to the way Arab media had to reconfigure itself. The seismic shift that shook the region has been fed by a revolution, not necessarily about religion or ideology in a dogmatic sense, but fed by the endeavors to create free societies with dignity, fairness, and justice. In the old days, the media role, a first instinct, was to shield the public for information. This was not possible anymore, and discontent with state media, which has always been brewing for a long time, with grievances against government-appointed media editors and broadcast network chiefs, has now become sustained internal disillusion everywhere, resulting in a massive loss of credibility by entities notorious for corruption, scandals, compromises of editorial integrity, and an institutional aversion to reform. The political tussle for major reforms that we have seen in many countries means altering the media landscape as well. There is now a real opportunity to reform state television channels and transform them from public into public service broadcasting, from entities that took dictates from ministries of information into real channels in favor of the public interest. And we have seen it in countries like Tunisia and Morocco attempt to set for the first time regulatory body, or even in some countries have media reform and grappling for the first time with the right to information. So one does not need to reinvent the wheel. There are plenty of international laws that provide a robust protection for freedom of expression. But it is quite clear that in many countries in the Arab world, a still unreconstructed and corrupt political class is in serious breach of all or most of these standards. The overwhelming interference by government in the regulatory decision, the lack of recognition of the most basic principle of content and source diversity, pluralism, the manipulation of licensing processes, manipulative rules of accreditation, the paucity of journalists' rights, restriction on contents, the weak tradition of protection of confidentiality and the right of citizens to know, and the primacy of secrecy, these are immense, formidable challenges for all of us, and it's left to Arab journalists and their unions to fight for democratic change. And we all know that censorship, if not overt, certainly self-censorship exists in many countries. Publishing remains a dangerous business. In many countries, Arab journalists are pressing their government to change their ways, and their unions must also play a role by setting high standards of free expression and ethical journalists. And there have been much to do to create a professional and responsible journalistic ethics. But when you look at when authorities in Egypt raided broadcasters, censored newspapers, arrested bloggers, run amok with arresting journalists at random, and still staging politicized trials to intimidate them, it was a terrible spectacle to see journalists ganging up against journalists. And it is almost a mission impossible to try and get journalists to fight for a space for professional and independent media activity and promote a journalism that operates within a credible ethical framework when they are unable to eliminate the prejudice and powerlessness that currently divide them. Building a new solidarity with civil society is also a priority for us. It has always been a major task for us to build a wider coalition, and this is what I'm here to observe and participate in your work as defenders. Being a journalist today is full of risk. Everywhere, not just in the Arab world. We are subject to assassinations, jailing, harassment, kidnapping, and we are also subject to more undue political influence, more surveillance and more restriction than ever before. Today, almost everywhere, the compiling of massive data banks of personal information and the surveillance of internet and personal communication pose real challenges to long-held tradition of personal freedom. Colleagues, there is much to do and very much we can do. We in the IFJ are not foolhardy idealists. Our action is rooted in the day-to-day reality of journalists and media workers, but together we can play a crucial role in this difficult period to come. To the journalists in jail or waiting trial or being pushed around, we can make a difference. We can make a difference to the families of killed journalists, sometimes completely demoralized and needing somebody to rally around them. And for those tens of thousands of journalists who have not given up on their craft and have to face the anxiety, the stress, the load, and truly believe they can fight together, we can make a difference. Thank you very much and good luck with your work.